So I had a chance to catch up with Leigh Steinberg, who is the ultimate model for the agent in the movie Jerry Maguire, portrayed by one Tom Cruise. What a movie that was. Well, he was an iconic figure in the NFL. And then he hit rock bottom. He battled alcohol. He lost everything, including his career. And he has rebuilt it now to the point where he has returned to representing young athletes in a completely different generation. I started out by asking him on Tuesday afternoon about this being his 43rd NFL draft coming up in 2017. It blew me away when I saw it on his Twitter. And so I asked Leigh what he felt like the biggest changes were from when he started this process 4 decades ago to where it is now.
Well, in 1975, when I began with the first pick in the first round of the NFL draft, Steve Bartkowski, first of all, there really wasn't a settled field of agentry. Teams could just hang up the phone and say, we don't deal with agents, bang. So most players represented themselves or had their parents represent them. So that, of course, is a major change. If Rip Van Winkle had gone to sleep back in 1975 and awoke today to see the extraordinary changes, he would just roll back over in culture shock. Teams back in 1975 were making $2.5 million each year as their share of the national television contract. This year, that figure was $226 million. Teams in the NFL were valued, Seattle and Tampa Bay, at $16.5 million, and today the Dallas Cowboys are $4.3 billion. You have the whole field of fantasy sports with 45 million people playing fantasy football every week. The development of the internet, which both can help players brand but can also get them into trouble. It's the imposition of salary caps for rookies negotiating in the NBA and in the NFL. So it's a vastly different world.
It sounds extremely complicated, this process that you talk about. So, Leigh, did you prefer it then when it was more simple, or do you like it the way it is now?
So many more opportunities, and it provides a fundamental ability to build for second career. So today, a sport like pro football has become so dominant in the popular culture. It's not only the most popular sport, it's the most popular television show and form of televised entertainment. So it gives a player who's smart, who does what we ask them to do, which is to go back to the high school community, set up a scholarship fund, work for a Boys and Girls Club or a church, to then go back to the college community and do what Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Warren Moon, Edgerrin James, a number of players have done, endow a full scholarship and stay close to those alums, and then go on to the professional city and set up a charitable foundation that has leading business figures, political community leaders, and leave a legacy. So Warwick Dunn has just put the 160th single mother and their family into their first home by making the down payment and having it outfitted. And players who do that then have tremendous opportunities for second career. 3 of the players we work with who are retired are NFL actual owners, small pieces of teams. Ray Childress in Houston and Warwick Dunn in Atlanta, and for a long time it was the same thing with Deron Cherry with Jacksonville. So this generation, no longer the greeters in front of a Las Vegas casino, but owners of business, broadcast talents, owners of teams, and their opportunities are boundless.
Why do you feel like that's the right way to do it, Leigh, to send these guys back to the communities where they came from and to start working on charity projects even when they first get into the NFL?
I think you have to look at a young man or woman holistically and think about what their other talents are other than sports, because the only sure thing is that the athletic career will end so early and they'll still have the majority of their life to live. And so by stimulating those talents, you can they learn everything in sports you need to know about success in broader life. They learn self-discipline, teamwork, massive amounts of information which need to be employed in very short circumstances, courage under pressure, the ability to elevate your performance in critical situations in adversity. So all that basic skill set comes into play, but they need to have an awareness of how to network, how to be involved in the world. My dad had two core values. One was to treasure relationships, especially family, and the second was to try to make a meaningful difference in the world. So when we had Lennox Lewis, the former heavyweight boxing champion, get up and cut a public service announcement that said, "Real men don't hit women," it could do more to change the attitudes of rebellious adolescents towards the issue of domestic violence than 1,000 authority figures ever could. So that high profile gives them the ability to trigger imitative behavior.
Amazing advice from your dad. Leigh Steinberg is a player agent for a lot of NFL guys, both past and present, like Paxton Lynch, the Denver Broncos quarterback. It's After Hours with Amy Lawrence here on CBS Sports Radio. So, Leigh, let's talk about Paxton a little bit. He went into a great situation there in Denver, not expecting to be the starter, but he did get a couple of games under his belt. Where did you see the greatest improvement from him during his rookie year?
Well, of course, he was coming from the spread offense, as a lot of today's quarterbacks do. That's not the offense that's played in the pros, pro set under center. So it was a learning process, and I think he adapted rapidly. The difference between his use this year and, say, a Jared Goff or Dak Prescott was that Denver is always in the Super Bowl race, and so every game is critical, and they were trying to win it all this year. Well, a young quarterback, really I shouldn't have mentioned Dak Prescott because he's been so successful and the team is in the playoff race, but for most young quarterbacks who get drafted high, they go to teams that are struggling. And so the first year of a quarterback in the NFL is so much adjustment to the faster game, the more complex defenses, and so the player tends not to look all that great, and you have to live through the lining up over guard instead of center, interceptions I'll never throw again, to get to slowing the field down and having them be great. And we used to give a player 3 years or 4 years and then judge them, and now it's 3 games. So Paxton got play time. Would he have loved to start? Absolutely, because he's competitive. But he understood his situation, which was to be supportive for the starter and supportive for the team. And he did start 2 games. He got in for a half of a third, and that will all help him for next year. But that's different than being the starter every week and being able to get rhythm going with the wide receivers, to be able to see the field over and over again. He didn't get that, but he'll start when it's time to start, and there's a long, brilliant future ahead for him.
Wow, so much insight there on the young Denver Broncos quarterback, but also the changes in the process from 43 years ago when Leigh Steinberg first was involved in the NFL draft. It's After Hours with Amy Lawrence on CBS Sports Radio and CBSSportsRadio.com. So the second half of my conversation with Leigh, I began by asking him about these 3 young quarterbacks that he's already signed. And he's got a bunch of other players too, like the great offensive lineman from USC, Chad Wheeler. But he is now representing quarterbacks from Central Michigan, Tulsa, and Texas Tech with Patrick. And I asked him what kind of expectations he has for these young guys, this trio, and also how does he get his players ready for the fast lane that is the NFL?
What's changed is the second season of scouting, which starts with the team bowl game, what we saw last night, and then continues, is become every bit as determinative as almost the whole college career, because the draft is a projection as to how a team is going to do for the next 10 to 12 years. It's not a merit badge for great college performance. They're thinking about, can this be a franchise quarterback, someone we can win because of rather than with, build around for 10 to 12 years, and in critical adversity, raise their level of play. They've thrown 2 picks, the crowd's booing, the game's starting to look out of hand. What do they do then? Can they adopt a quiet mind, compartmentalize, and move forward? So it starts with training. Virtually every player goes off to some form of training with the quarterbacks. They also get specialized quarterback training. And that's to prepare them for the All-Star games, the East-West, and the Senior Bowl if they are a senior and playing them, and to prepare them for the critical scouting combine where they run physical drills and then they test at their position. Then the action moves back to pro scouting day at the college campus for a quarterback. Their throwing session, a 45-minute throwing session at pro scouting day where they do all the basic throws is extremely important. You want scouts walking away that are oohing and awing. After that, teams can come back another time to campus and look at the player all over again with their whole brain trust. And then in April, teams have the ability to bring 30 players in to not to work them out, but just to talk to them again. So this process is long, and in it you'll see meteoric rise and fall. Patrick Mahomes has a chance to be a top-of-the-draft type quarterback. He's got an arm that's incredibly dynamic, best in the draft. I have a video of him throwing the ball virtually 70 yards from his knees. He's smart. He's very mobile, can throw on the run, and he can run. So look at him as a franchise quarterback. Cooper Rush, highly productive at the college level, and very steady, can take a team along. Somebody's going to be happy to have him in charge. Dane Evans from Tulsa, tremendously prolific at the college level, a little undersized, but don't let that deter you because he's got terrific talent too.
It sounds like a very diverse group that you'll be guiding toward this upcoming draft. I wanted to ask you about social media. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's obviously such a huge factor for public figures and athletes in 2017. How do you advise your clients as you're preparing them to take this step into the public eye?
That from this point on, the only time they are private is when they're in their home or apartment. That when they walk out on the street, every interaction is going to be observed, and the fact they don't see anybody they know doesn't mean that other people don't recognize them. So if they have to be very careful in terms of consumption of alcohol, always careful in terms of interaction with women, gracious in their interaction. They don't want to do that. Simple solution: go play on a practice field, in a game with friends. You won't be paid, but no one will criticize you. When it comes to social media, understand that this is not some intimate form of communication between you and your friends. This is a broadcast going out worldwide to anybody who's tuned into the internet. So restraint with pen and tongue is the first key. And if you're tempted to post something, wait a minute, wait 10, and think about the possible effects of whatever you're going to say on every constituency and how this is going to stand the test of time. So people have to be extremely careful. We all have thoughts in our mind that we think. Most of us are very happy that we didn't express them all. And so you need to caution an athlete because they're under big microscopes. Now, if they're potential draftees in any of the major sports, there are huge security apparatus. They're going into every single incident that ever happened in their life from when they were in grammar school on. So don't add to the dissonance and hurt yourself by expressing some controversial or destructive opinion.
If only every public figure would be able to exercise that type of self-control. Leigh Steinberg is with us here for a couple of minutes on After Hours with Amy Lawrence, CBS Sports Radio. So before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about your own personal journey. You're very public on social media and in a book that you've released about your battles with alcohol, and you are constantly celebrating the number of days it's been that you've been sober. You hit rock bottom in your life and in your career, Leigh, and now here you are back in the NFL representing a new generation of athletes. What does it mean to you personally to be back in this particular position after everything that you've survived?
Well, it's a blessing, and the reason I've been public about the struggle I had with alcohol, which will continue in one form, forever, is in the hope that someone who's out there struggling, who's lost hope, who's depressed, and whose lives coming unraveled might hear the message that there is hope. There are 12-step programs with unique fellowships, and think about starting their life anew. In March, I'll be 7 years continuously sober, and life's exciting now. My values in terms of being a good father and making a difference in the world, I can utilize again, and it all comes by putting sobriety first.
Well, I so appreciate you sharing that part of your story with us. No doubt that other people can connect with that. You can find Leigh on Twitter at Leigh Steinberg. I look forward to finding you in person in Houston. Thank you so much for a couple of minutes, Leigh.
Oh, you're welcome, Amy. We'll see you at our 30th annual Super Bowl party.